I can see we whipped through this material pretty quickly. So we should have a lot of time for questions now, but that concludes our presentation. And I'll just keep it open in case people want to go back to a specific slide, unless you tell me, Amy, unless you want me to stop sharing the screen.
I think this is great.
Maybe stop sharing, Joel, just so we can see all 300 people.
Yes, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Just a few things. I'm sorry if you got let in late. We maxed out at 300. So as people were dropping off, I was then able to bring more people into the meeting. But just to remind everyone, this has been recorded and it will be posted on our website. I also apologize, I wasn't able to turn on the live captioning, but please contact me directly if you need closed captioning of the recorded presentation. I'll try to figure that out for you. Okay, so we had so many fantastic questions coming in. I'm going to try to go back through a few of them that I was gathering along the way and ask the group. And then if we get toward the end and I didn't ask your question, feel free to pipe in. Okay, we had well, real quickly, there were a number of questions that came in about educational programs and our Explore the Coast program. So that those projects we aren't talking about today, but I encourage you to please go to the Explore the Coast program website or webpage on our website and reach out to our Explore the Coast staff, who will be happy to answer all of your questions about our educational programs and Explore the Coast programs and that kind of a thing. The first question was, can we submit multiple pre-proposals? And I'm going to go ahead and say yes. The answer to that question is yes. And do you need to get approval from the regional manager in order to submit a pre-proposal? The answer to that is no. You can go ahead and just send us a pre-proposal without contacting the regional manager if you would like to do that. If you would like to contact the regional manager first, that is also great. The second question for the group, do you fund research needed for designing restoration projects? Anyone like to jump in?
I would say, and Marilyn probably could chime in as well. I would not say that we fund like pure research, but we certainly fund, the technical studies needed to design projects. Marilyn?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, making sure to focus on the operational aspects, what's directly needed for the associated implementation project is key. I think we certainly recognize that more effort is needed with more innovative climate adaptation, sea level rise, wildfire resilience, techniques that are under development. And so that can be included, but it can't be to the level of published research papers and topics that don't directly lead to the implementation.
Great, thank you. There was a question about, do we fund natural infrastructure projects like beach dunes? The answer to that is absolutely yes. We love those kinds of coast resilience projects. And then related to that, there was a question about, would we fund English ivy removal to protect redwoods? I would say for that question, you should reach out to the regional manager for where your project is located. I think that it really depends on the project and how the invasive plant control is really integrated into the restoration project. I don't know, Amy, Marilyn, and Joel, if you want to jump in on that, or if that's okay. Okay, great. There was a question about, how does reimbursement work on acquisition projects? Joel, do you want to take that?
Sure. Acquisition projects are sort of an exception to the reimbursement rule. So for an acquisition project, we have a number of conditions that we have to meet in terms of having an appraisal done and approved, and other documents related to the acquisition that have to be all wrapped up and reviewed for our due diligence. And then at that point, before the property is acquired, there's a special way of invoicing us, and we would send our grant funds into the escrow account for the acquisition to close. So that's not a case where you have to front the money for the acquisition. Yeah, that's a good point. Good question.
Great, thank you. This was a question from Michael Nelson. I'm wondering if this is the Michael Nelson that we used to work with on the San Diego River. The question is, will we still work on working waterfronts? And yes, the answer to that is yes, it's still part of our enabling legislation, and it is still something that we would like to continue to help build resilient communities and working waterfront communities along the coast. Are there geographic restrictions on our wildfire work? Amy, do you want to take that one?
Well, in general, with our wildfire resilience money that we received this year and last year, it's our entire jurisdiction. So the coast, coastal watersheds, the 9-county Bay Area. So it's that map I showed at the beginning. We have received some regional fire resilience funding that does have, more, like I believe there was a Central Coast block grant. But our wildfire resilience money, it's broad.
Thank you. There was a question about when do costs start counting on the grant? Is it during the after the grant award or after the grant agreement execution? So you can start billing project-related funds to the Conservancy grant after the grant agreement is executed and the conditions precedent to beginning work are completed, such things like having a completed work program, having an acknowledgement plan completed, having the insurance requirements completed, and that can all be found through the grantee manual online, and feel free to reach out if you have more specific questions about that.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I just to add to that, I think it is important, this came up in one of the slides, but don't start work that you want reimbursed by the Conservancy until you receive an email or letter from the project manager saying that you can start work under the grant. There will be a letter / email that says that.
yes, thanks, Amy. I'm going to jump over to the new questions that I see in the chat. Where can we find out information about specific funding allocations? Looks like there was $100 million funding allocation that somebody is interested in. So I would say reach out to the regional manager that covers the project area where you're interested in. So this person had asked about Russian River project. So that would be our North Coast Regional Manager, Karen Gear, and she can help you sort through sort of the more specific funding pots that we have and if they would be applicable to your project.
Megan, I just wanted to pop in.
Yeah.
Marilyn, I forgot to emphasize, I think that's really key, that applicants don't need to worry about deciding what program type or fund source your project may fit under. We will look at that on the back end on our side and then communicate with you about that, whether it's a good fit and for which program type and fund source.
Thanks for pointing that out, Marilyn. Here, you can stay on the line. I have a question for you. Do you fund post-construction vegetation management and monitoring?
We do. So we certainly, can fund all stages of a project. So planning, permitting, construction or implementation, and then monitoring. Again, I would say similar to the research question, that monitoring needs to be directly related to the implementation project and analyzing the outcomes, maintaining that project. So it does have a limit to how much monitoring, but we certainly can fund those activities.
Thank you. Here's a question. What is the grant performance period? And as a follow-up, will the grantee be required to maintain the property for a period of time after project completion? And how will that be determined? Did you want to take that, Amy?
The time period for the grant? Yeah, I mean, that really depends on the time frame for your project. So please let us know the schedule for your project. We try to be as flexible as possible, but our funding sources have different expiration dates. So that often influences when, how long we can be funding a project for. So it's really important to be upfront about your anticipated schedule, and then we can work with you on the term of the grant agreement, depending on your schedule and our funding sources.
And Amy, is it correct to say that we definitely try to be flexible, but often our funding sources might have a 3-year term, so that might be kind of the easy thing for us to work with a project with a term like that. And we can figure out ways to be flexible, but that's sort of the straightforward kind of baseline situation that we find ourselves in with our funding.
Yeah. And I think this relates to another question about, can you apply for planning and implementation simultaneously? And typically, no. Typically, we would need to fund planning first, which would include CEQA, and then we could consider funding for implementation. But our board has to make CEQA findings to fund an implementation project. So we definitely can't fund planning and implementation if you have not completed CEQA.
But we do frequently fund those as 2 separate phases. And the
Right.
other thing that I think was in the question too was what would be the term of the agreement for, or how long do you have to maintain something? Was there something like that, Megan?
Yeah, it was asking about how long the property where the project took place would need to be protected.
Right, and I can take a stab at that, which is just to say that we hope that the projects that we're funding will be useful for a very long time, and we would expect that they would be operated and maintained for the acquisition purpose for as long as they're useful lifetime. But we use a 20-year term in our grant agreements that involve implementation and capital improvements, and then the grant agreements will have a section saying, we expect you to operate and maintain the project for the purpose of that the project was done in the first place over that 20-year term, and we come out and monitor our projects every 5 years to just check in on things. So that's the basic answer, is 20 years.
Thank you, Joel. There was a question, is there a resource for locating individuals or agencies who help very small nonprofits find and obtain funding? I would say, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help connect you and help find funding for your project. We really want to try to help support very small nonprofits and community-based organizations to either access our funding or perhaps find other funding for your project.
And on that note, Megan, somebody sent me a question about supporting smaller community-based organizations with limited resources and the difficulty of that with reimbursable grants. We do have a way of fronting money to projects and grantees that meet specific criteria. So if the reimbursement part is absolutely impossible, and you can make a really good case, then we will consider fronting of some of the funds. But we do that on a limited basis.
Thanks, Amy. I see a question in here about how frequently you would invoice. We ask that you invoice no more than monthly, but at least quarterly. but then the question also said, could we invoice by task? And for that, I would say that we do try to have flexibility there, but this is something that you would work with the regional manager on through your grant proposal and grant agreement process. We got to the phasing question. Do we need to know exactly what land we want to acquire before applying? The answer to that is yes. I'm going to say yes to that. Do you want to say something different, Amy?
Sorry, Megan, I would just say,
go.
We could fund a planning process. I mean, if you are interested in, land acquisition for certain purposes in a given area, you can reach out to us. There might be opportunities.
Thanks, Amy. Yes, we can fund projects on federal properties. Depends on the project. Please reach out and let us know more about the project. There's a question about, Amy, this is to you. Is the Conservancy interested in funding beach nourishment?
I think we'd be, we're supportive of beach nourishment if it is sustainable. So I would say we're not going to fund beach nourishment if it is something that needs to be happening, frequently and is being done primarily for economic purposes. But if it's part of, nature-based restoration activities and is sustainable, we would consider it. And certainly, we do beneficial use of dredge sediment and beneficial use of construction sediment as part of projects, and trying to reconnect local watersheds to the shore. Yeah. There was another question I think we skipped over, Megan, about would you fund public educational programs on the coast? Yes, we do. That's our Explore the Coast program. So definitely look that up on our website. We do an annual RFP. And can you clarify what nature-based adaptation refers to? And I'm going to put that one on Marilyn. You have to define nature-based adaptation.
There are many definitions, but generally the concept is using natural habitats to achieve biological and physical goals. So much like a seawall or a levee can provide shoreline protection, eelgrass beds, marshes, beaches, natural habitats have great ability to provide shoreline protection in a more natural way, as well as also restoring habitat and function.
Great. I am skipping around a little, so do let me know if I missed anything. There was the one that I think we answered this, but I just want to answer it again. Can you fund CEQA, environmental review, and permitting? The answer is yes. We do fund the planning phase of restoration projects. We just fund it in two separate phases: planning first, CEQA environmental review, and once that is complete, then we can fund on the ground implementation after that. There was one that I missed. Expand on how grant approvals relate to the Conservancy board meetings. So when you submit your grant and Conservancy staff have agreed to present your project and recommend your project to our board for funding. So your grant is not formally approved until the Conservancy board approves your funding at a public meeting. And then from there, we enter into the grant agreement and satisfy the conditions so that you can begin your project. Our meetings are, I think we have 6 a year. And the schedule is a little different every year, but we try to meet about every other month. And yes, we approve. So that means we approve lots of projects at each of our board meetings. I'm just skipping some that I think we've answered.
Amy,
There's
we're
one,
indicating
can your
5.
funding sources be used to establish a long-term management endowment? And the answer to that is no.
Let's see. Are the scoring criteria available for pre or full proposals? We don't have scoring criteria per se. The grant applications are reviewed based on our project eligibility and project selection criteria, which are laid out in the grant application, and is essentially how well each of the projects helps accomplish those project selection criteria. And we'd be happy to talk through how your project meets those criteria for each of the different proposals. Are non-nature-based activities eligible, such as design and construction of a bike path that connects to the coast? Yes, absolutely. Public access projects are definitely eligible. Not all projects necessarily will be able to fall into the sort of nature-based bin of types of projects, but that being said, we're always looking to try to build more resilient projects, projects that incorporate multiple benefits, such as habitat restoration and preservation, in addition to providing public access to the coast where we can. So it depends on the project. Will you consider habitat gardening programs on public school properties? Yes, I think we funded a number of those types of projects through our Explore the Coast program, but feel free to reach out to the Explore the Coast team on that. It sounds like that might be something that's a better fit for some other different state funding opportunities that we could connect you to.
Yeah, on the urban greening, schoolyard greening projects, the Natural Resources Agency has received significant funding for urban greening in this year's budget. So I would encourage you to check out the California Natural Resources Agency website and look into their programs. We have done those in the past, but given the fact that Resources has funding specifically for urban greening, I don't think it's going to be a huge focus of our work. And somebody asked whether our climate resilience funds can be used for acquisitions. And yes, yeah, the climate resilience funding is a very broad source of funding.
There's a question that says the legislature points to the Coastal Conservancy funding as their solution to sea level rise for coastal communities. Will these grants fund coastal flood protection infrastructure to protect from sea level rise communities? I think to protect from sea level rise, both of economic importance and disadvantaged communities. Do you want to take that question, Amy?
Yeah, I'm reading that question. The sea level rise adaptation funding, it's about 160 million. 120 million of that is specifically for nature-based sea level rise adaptation. So the project would need to have a nature-based element to it. The remaining funds, about 37.5 million, is broader and talks about ports, waterfronts, and ecosystems. So yes, those funds could be used to support coastal flood protection infrastructure. I think that's the short story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Joel, I'm going to give this one to you. Could you tell us a little about your priorities with regards to projects in upper watershed areas? Does the proposal need to show potential impacts on the coast and ocean?
Yeah, good question. It's true that most of our work tends to be located closer to the coast, with the exception of our wildfire resilience projects have often been in upper watershed areas as well. But generally speaking, we do like to have the further we're working from the coast, the more we need to make a case for the importance of the project for coastal resources. And one of the linkages that, just as an example, that is often made would be for salmonid habitat, for example, for like an anadromous fish species, and providing enhancing or restoring habitat or passage to upper watershed, although CDFW has a lot of funding for that as well. But that's just an example. Yeah, so it is good if you're working in the upper watershed to be able to make the connection to resources closer to the actual coast. But don't rule it out until you can always check in with us about it.
Thank you. So I note that we've come to the end of our meeting time, and I see that there are 48 chat messages that I haven't gotten to yet. I really apologize that we weren't able to get to all of your questions. I think maybe we can talk internally about if there's a way to have another sort of open Q&A session like this one, so that we can help address some of the questions that we weren't able to get to today. You can always reach out to us individually. So the contact information for the regional managers is on the Coastal Conservancy website under the grants page. You can reach out to us directly with your follow-up questions. And if we're not the right people, we'll make sure to find someone who can get your questions answered. So Amy, with that, I don't know if you want us to wrap up here or keep going?
Yes, sorry, I was just scrolling through the questions to make sure we're not missing. I tried to answer a few in the chat that were pretty straightforward. Yeah, pre-proposed, okay. And the video and the PowerPoint is going to be posted on our website. And again, you can reach out to regional managers there were some questions that were kind of specific to a given project. And the way to get an answer on those is to just shoot an email to the regional manager, who will either engage you in conversation or ask you to submit a pre-proposal, or let you know if it's not a fit for the Conservancy funding.
And maybe we could just also answer. Sorry.
We were not anticipating 300 people, obviously, because that's the limit on our Zoom. And I want to thank you all for joining. And we'll probably have to do this again, so the people who didn't get in from the waiting room have a chance. And yeah, feel free to reach out. We're available for questions. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Okay, Megan, I think we're going to have to, I don't want to close down because we got to get that chat saved and it goes away.
Oh, okay. I'll figure that out.
We need
Oh, I
to-
need to stop. I will stop the recording now. Stopping the recording now.